Hi, everyone. I'm Maggie McGrath, senior editor at Forbes. Over the past month, tens of thousands of federal employees have lost their jobs due to cuts from the Department of Government Efficiency. What does this mean for the broader job market, and how can these workers find new jobs? Joining us to answer these questions is Allison Shrivastava. She's an economist with Indeed's hiring lab. Allison, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So, just from your perspective as an economist, can we zoom out and just look at the number of jobs lost? I know it's an ever-evolving picture, but what is your qualitative assessment of what we've seen over the past 4 to 8 weeks?
So there's a couple of ways to look at this. There's the direct jobs that have been lost, and there's also the effect of uncertainty on the job market in the form of, are contracts going to be cut back? What does this mean for the broader economy? So there's a little bit of a ripple effect there as well. And, it kind of has made us a little bit frozen in the labor market, if it will. When you're getting mixed information, you're not sure what direction things are going. It kind of causes everybody to freeze up. And, freezing in a labor market is a form of stability, but can't stay frozen for too long.
Can't stay frozen for too long. And one of the things I'm wondering about is, does that uncertainty create a recession? Are we at risk for these DOGE cuts to cause a recession because of not just the jobs that are being cut, but because of all the employers who might be just holding on to cash reserves and not hiring?
I would be pretty reticent to say that DOGE cuts alone would be the cause of a recession. I think that there is a lot of other uncertainty added to the market, and we'll see what happens.
Do you have any predictions? It's the end of March, so the next jobs report is coming out at the end of next week. What are you expecting from that report?
So the next jobs report we will have will actually start to capture more of these layoffs as well. There's a little bit of a lag there, and so not all the layoffs have really been properly captured. I would expect that there might be a little bit of an erosion. I don't expect there to be necessarily a big drop off, but like I said, if you stay frozen for long enough, you might get frostbite. And I expect that we might see some of that in the next report, but we'll find out.
We also saw private sectors with layoff. I'm going to restart that question. In January, we saw companies in the private sector laying off employees. I think it was part of that belt tightening due to political and economic instability. But if you had to categorize 2025 so far across both the public and private sectors in terms of job opportunities and job loss, how would you describe it?
So layoffs are still relatively low right now by historical context. Quits rates as well are really low. So what that means is that people are both hesitant to lose their workers, which makes sense. We just came off of 2022 when there was a lot of competition for hiring. And I bet there's a little bit of a scarring effect there from, business owners being concerned whether or not they can find the employees that they need. But that quits rate being low as well shows you that people aren't confident anymore that they can find another job if they were to leave their own. It could also be that there were better matches made when the quits rate was really high. But I think that, there are jobs being added to the economy, but they're being added in a pretty small subset of sectors. They're really being carried by healthcare and things like that. So while the overall numbers, do look pretty good, how you feel about the economy right now is probably going to really depend on what sector you're in, what sector you hire in, what sector you were seeking employment in. That's where you really get a differentiation.
That's an important point. And I want to dive into more where we are seeing job growth. So you mentioned healthcare. What types of jobs are being created there? And what are the other sectors in addition to healthcare where there is some uptick in job creation?
Yeah, so we at Indeed, we track job posting data, and we've seen a few sectors that have had, quite a bit of stability. Accounting is one. There's always been accounting jobs. They're well above their pre-pandemic baseline. Some service sectors are still performing pretty well. Legal sectors performing well. And healthcare is a very strong sector. And I think, with an aging population will be time to come. But there's other sectors like software development, banking, finance, knowledge work sectors that are pretty unsteady on their feet right now.
Unsteady on their feet, meaning it's hard to get a job and they both aren't hiring and people aren't leaving those sectors.
It's a very competitive hiring market for those sectors because there's more people competing for a smaller number of jobs, which a lot of the federal workers are from industries that would be similar to knowledge work. A lot of them are really specialized workers. So they'll be entering a job market that is already pretty tight for their sectors.
I am sure that is concerning news for anyone watching who has lost their job, but what would you recommend to a federal worker who had a job up until a few weeks ago and is now on the job market? Is there a way they should be positioning their resume or their interviews in order to optimize on the opportunities that do exist?
Yeah, so I've come from the government sector prior to coming to the private sector as well, and it is different. You have to tailor your resume differently. It's a completely different language as well. So I would definitely recommend reviewing your resume and adapting it for a private job market. And keep in mind too, it takes about 15 weeks for the average job search. It could take longer if you are looking in sectors that are pretty tight right now, which a lot of federal workers will be. So I would set a budget, review your assets and expenses as soon as you can. And one piece of advice that I know gets hammered home a lot, but it's because it's important. Leveraging your network is such a powerful tool. People want to hire people. And the more you can let people know that you are looking, what you have to offer, that networking really goes a long way.
So network, review your resume. Is there anything else you would tell federal workers right now who are kind of maybe perhaps just trying to get on their feet and don't know where to start?
One good thing is that a lot of employers have been moving away in job postings from requiring stricter educational requirements and instead acquiring skills. So that's promising if you're wanting to, say, reskill yourself and enter in a different sector. So say you have been doing policy analysis and you'd like to look into something like accounting. I would definitely take stock of where jobs are, what's important to you in terms of having a job, and see if you can kind of pivot your existing skills to fit what the market's demanding.
Now, when you talk about what the market's demanding, I had a question from someone about whether jobs with a great deal of specific skills versus general skills are more popular right now. Are employers looking for a Jack or Jill of all trades, or are they looking for someone who has spent the last 15 years doing one thing and perfecting that skill?
Yeah, I'm going to go back to it, but it depends on your sector. But here's why, if you say you work in software development, for example, you just came off of a really tight labor market, 2022, where, people really competing for hires. And so maybe they were much more open with what they wanted to have on. And now, for those sectors, the ball's really much more in the employer's court. So if they can have more stringent requirements, more specific requests, I think that's more of a function of labor market tightness than anything else.
You mentioned reskilling, and we hear about that year after year after year, but I'm wondering, is 2025 going to be an above normal, above average year in folks completely switching industries, or is that not something we can predict?
It's definitely not something I can predict right now. There is a lot up in the air in terms of what what sectors will be expanded upon or contracted. So I'll definitely be keeping a watch on that alongside you.
There are a number of economic signals that I know economists like to look at. What will you be watching in the coming weeks and months that will perhaps paint a picture of the rest of 2025, or at least, the next 3 to 6 months?
So there are a number of indicators, like you said, and I would encourage anyone looking at the labor market to really take in all of the indicators that you can. They're all important. They all play a role, and it's easy to get fixated on just one or two and having that be an end all for your economic understanding. I've been really interested in the quits rate and layoffs rate for most of 2025, just because they have both been so low and frozen, and kind of waiting to see what the negative repercussions, if there are any, from those two metrics really flatlining for quite a while.
The word unprecedented is often used to describe the current news cycle, but I'm wondering, Allison, as you look at the economic trends and the job trends that we've seen for 2025 so far, is there a recent year that serves as a good analogy and then perhaps guidance for folks who are looking for some degree of insight or comfort?
If we really zoom out over the last few years, a lot has happened, and a lot of has happened for the very first time. We just had a complete pandemic shuttering overnight of all businesses. And then we had one of the hottest labor markets we've seen. And now we're coming off of that. I know that it seems like it's been a while ago, and in terms of time it has, but that serves to inform kind of where we are now in a lot of ways. I think the hardest part about really feeling comfortable in predicting what might happen for this year is really uncertainty around where policy's coming from, what policy's happening, and even with the layoffs, like how many people will be affected. All that kind of uncertainty really does start to impact how you feel about the labor market, and how you feel about the labor market impacts the labor market itself.
It's a self-perpetuating cycle.
Yeah, it is. If you don't feel confident that you can expand your business, then you won't hire. If you don't feel confident that you can leave your job and find a new one, then you won't. That, chicken or the egg, is it the economy or sentiment? But they sentiment does certainly serve to inform the economy.
Absolutely. It's completely intertwined. Though it makes me wonder that if some folks were to just take the leap and hire or quit and look for a new job, if that would kickstart things. What do you think it would take to juice the job market, so to speak?
I think definitely confidence in certainty. I know that you've probably heard that word, especially from economists, so much lately: uncertainty, uncertainty, uncertainty. But it matters, especially if you're wanting an economy to expand. You have to know that your expansion is going to be worthwhile. So I definitely think uncertainty is going to be the keyword of 2025.
That's good news for folks who like uncertainty and bad news for folks who like certainty. And I suspect more of us fall in the latter bucket than the former. But, before I let you go, do you at Indeed have any other predictions or any other trends that you're watching right now that our Forbes audience should know about?
I think the biggest thing that we will be watching is, again, another tagline that I'm going to be saying for the rest of 2025, hopefully not, but with things being so frozen and having that really sideways movement of a lot of metrics, you can't stay frozen forever without having some negative side effects. And so we have a wealth of data available. We look at, job postings data, remote jobs, and those are things that I think really serve for timely metrics, which is important in today's economy, right? Yet that you don't want any kind of lag time in using, understanding what's going on. So I think timely metrics are going to be the most important thing moving forward for a while.
Allison Shrivastava, thank you so much for joining us and breaking down what we know about the labor market right now. We will hope to talk to you in a few weeks or months when things are a little less frozen, but for the time being, thank you so much for your insight.
Thank you for having me.